Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. In this session, we want to open up a conversation regarding the issue of our youth in our masajid. Firstly, we don't want to intellectualize too much, but it's necessary in analysis to look at some realities. Firstly, our youth are developing a culture which is very alien to what many of the older generation in our community is used to. Because the culture of our youth seems quite strange to the older generation, it's only natural that there's going to be a communication gap. Secondly, for quite a long time, the older generation, in particular the immigrant community and some of those from the indigenous community, understood the reality of the Muslim community as a community apart, separate from society. Right? And the task of being Muslim is to insulate yourself from society. Well, the younger generation is immersed in society, immersed in social networking, immersed in popular culture. So you have two different visions of community, or I should say, a vision of community and the reality of where the community is at. Because we're not going to say that the younger generation has a vision of community per se, but they are living their concept of community, maybe without really thinking about it, right? Just going with the flow. And so here then we have to figure out how to deal with this gap between the older generation and the younger generation, because definitely it is a real gap. The problem comes when the masjid is turned into a space which excludes dealing with the youth in language, in activity. So there's no address to the situation of the youth. The youth can't identify with the language in the minbar. We're not talking about just Arabic or English or any other language that's used. We're talking about the mindset, the culture, and so on and so forth. The other problem that we have is how far do we go in immersing ourselves into popular culture, right? Just because our youth are immersed in popular culture, not all of them, does that mean that the Muslim community must conform to popular culture? These are some questions to be raised. You know, where's the give and take here? What's the role of the deen here? And essentially, this is the difficulty that we have two poles, two tendencies now. One which is pushing forward into full immersion into popular culture, and the other is remaining insulated from popular culture. And both are impacted by the society itself. The important thing, and this is the fourth point, is to develop a relationship with people. That's the essence of community. Because we can't say that the idea of insulating ourselves from society is working for many in our community. We find even within that model uh, a lot of problems or a number of serious issues. But across the board, if we're able to develop relationships with one another and try to understand one another, whether those who are in our own peer groups or those who are younger than us or with those who are older than us, all the different variations as far as age and experience and so on and so forth, if a dialogue is taking place, if there's a space in which we can begin to speak, if there's a space in which we can begin to argue our point, because there are going to be arguments, there is a lot of emotion that's tied into these issues. If we can generate that space of communication and dialogue, then we're able to see what the issue is. But as is currently, there's a lack of understanding. There's a lack of understanding. And the movement towards polarizing the community by saying them and us is not a movement which is very productive because it's functioning out of a reaction to the situation rather than a deep understanding and an effort at bringing about change. Although our community is one in which uh, conflict at times generates uh, new realities, right? So we see that sometimes the disagreements that take place are beneficial, even though they may not seem so at the moment. There has to be a more productive way of addressing the situation, and it requires a dialogue, it requires an effort to understand, and it requires give and take. الله أعلم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم الحمد لله.